Hi guys, I'm John Green. What? Wait, no. I thought... It's funny, okay? Fine. Hi guys, I'm Ed, and welcome back to Crash Course English. Let's jump right in. Today we'll be reviewing The Frailty of Man in Toni Morrison's novel Sula, which is funny seeing as how she has two sons in which she dedicated the book to. I don't know if she was trying to slam them for their cowardice or she just trying to teach them how not to act. Can't really say, but let's move on. In this novel, Toni introduces the life of two characters, Nell and Sula, who are born and raised in a place called the Bottom, or what would now be the modern suburbs. The people of the Bottom acquired the land through a slave deal, in which a slave dealt with a white plantation owner and was given land after doing a certain amount of chores. Of course, the man tricked the slave by giving him a rocky and hill-filled landscape that would have almost no monetary value at the time, and named it, for sake of sweetening the deal, the Bottom, or how he described it, the bottom of heaven, as it was. Emasculation of the people in this book comes in so many ways. One way being how they are harassed at a very young age by immigrants, by other people that are alienated in this new world. Irish children harassing black children because their place in this new world was secured only when they echoed the old residents' attitude towards blacks. They're echoing the white people's attitude towards blacks. But then when Sula stands up to them, she does it in a super manly, tough way by cutting the tip of her finger. She scares off the other boys by saying, "If I can do that to myself, what do you suppose I'll do to you?" And emasculating the Irish boys. As these boys are on the edge of manhood and they're entering their white male world that awaits them outside the Bottom, it does little to nurture, sustain, or even guide their masculinity and degrades them. But firstly, out of all the characters in Sula, we have to talk about Shadrach. Shadrach went to war. He went to the first war. And when he came back, he was profusely distraught. He was suffering from a lot of PTSD that was caused through the war. And as we see in a lot of veterans, it's very difficult for him to merge back to society. He comes back to the Bottom almost like a hermit and doesn't really talk to anybody. It is Sula who initiates his change, initiates his trying to belong. When Sula comes to him, all he can say is always. The one word he says is always. And she doesn't get it at the time, but that's what she needed. She needed to hear that. He was emasculated by the war, but when she came to him, he felt an overpowering urge to help her, to lead her on the right path, as she knows that her situation at home is not one she would rather have. She needs something to comfort her, and that's what he does. So to say that he did it himself, I don't think would be true, but I think that the idea that Sula exists, Sula took the chance on him, took the brave motion to help him, to try to talk to somebody she thought was lonely, might show that she's trying to re-emasculate what he lost, trying to make him who he used to be. The next character would be Ajax. Ajax comes and goes throughout the story, but he still plays a very vital role. He begins the story by being kind of a creep. Sula and Nell see him, don't really think much of him, except that he's not really worth their time. But as time goes on, Sula and Ajax start sleeping together. But when he starts feeling like the sexual relationship they might be having might be leading to something more, he breaks it off. He loses that sense of virtue that hopefully he had at some point, but we're not really sure. Maybe he never did. He's too afraid to love back, even though Sula would be more than ready to. I think this is another step of bravery, manhood, something that he is missing. He sleeps with multiple women, and perhaps there was this misinformation of what it means to be a man at the time, what he thought it meant to be a man. Maybe it was pleasure or something else. But when we see this, we see that he's showing cowardice. He's not ready to start something meaningful with somebody like Sula. But at first, Sula was feeling content with it, and then she just was unwilling to stick around. When a woman starts to care and raise questions about his character, then we get to Plum. Plum is the only male child of Ava, who loves men, but he survives, and then he gets to go to war, and when he comes back, he's hardly recognizable. He's taken so much from the war, he's suffered so much from what he's seen, that at the end, he's just not himself. And he ends up coping with this with addiction, drug addiction. He gets addicted to drugs, and it just makes him so weak. It makes Ava so scared about him that she ends up taking her own affection, turning it into her own sense of bravery, and killing her son by cradling him and then burning him alive. It's a really sad way of dealing with this, but in some way, Ava was taking the hardest decision out of anything. When Plum was weak, she knew that he deserved better than to die of overdosing or being known as that one addict, the junkie in the bottom. That she took it into her own hands and wanted everyone to remember her son as Plum before the war, before he was destroyed by the war. So as we see in the novel, Tony really wanted to make that emphasis that in the bottom, the men were weak. The women were the ones that had to make all the really tough decisions. They were the ones that were the most responsible, the most courageous, the most affectionate. But then we see the men, and they're the most downtrodden, most disabled in their minds, and their ability to cope with other people. This shift in gender boundaries shows that maybe it's not all black and white. Maybe the women are the ones that are in control, or maybe because of this control, there's something that's dragging them down, the responsibility that's dragging them down. So I can't say whether one was more influential on the other, if this was a society ruled by men or ruled by women, because in both sides of the story, there's something dragging each other down. The men had their position as being men, just from the politics, from the ethical standpoint of the society, they're already in charge. But because of how weak they are, they can't keep themselves in charge for very long. They have to constantly be helped out by the women. So, in conclusion, the men are truly emasculated in this novel. So the question begs, who's really in charge of this society? And whether we should bring that into our own society. Who's really in charge? We say that some houses are maternal and some are paternal. But we have to really, we can't just say that without seeing both sides of the story. I'm Eduardo Luque. Have a good day. Just cut that out.